It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night that gave you the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Sarah had just moved into her new apartment, a beautiful but old building that had a lot of history. As she was settling in, she heard strange noises coming from the walls. At first, she thought it was just the old building settling, but the noises grew louder and more persistent. She tried to ignore them, but they seemed to be getting closer and closer. She couldn't sleep, and she was starting to feel like she was losing her mind. One night, Sarah woke up to find that she was no longer alone in her apartment. A dark figure was standing in the corner of her room, watching her. She couldn't see its face, but she could feel its eyes on her. Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to move, but she was paralyzed with fear. The figure slowly started moving towards her, and Sarah felt like her heart was about to explode. As the figure got closer, Sarah could see that it was covered in long, black hair. Its eyes were glowing red, and its mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. She could feel its hot breath on her face as it leaned in to whisper something in her ear. Sarah couldn't make out what it was saying, but the words filled her with dread. She knew that whatever it was not of this world. She tried to fight it off, but it was too strong. For weeks, Sarah was tormented by the figure. It would visit her every night, whispering its sinister words in her ear. She tried everything to get rid of it, but nothing worked. She was trapped in her own apartment, with no escape. One night, as Sarah was lying in bed, she heard a knock on her door. She was terrified, but something inside her told her to answer it. When she opened the door, she saw a man standing there, dressed in black. The man told Sarah that he had been sent to help her, that he knew what was happening to her and how to stop it. Sarah was skeptical at first, but she was desperate for help. The man performed a ritual, and the figure disappeared. Sarah was relieved, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her. She thought she was safe, but she was wrong. Years later, Sarah was still haunted by the memory of that dark figure. She never forgot the terror it had inflicted upon her, and she knew that it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. She warned everyone she knew never to move into that building, but some people never listened. The dark figure still lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. It was a creature of the night, a demon from another realm, and it would never stop until it had claimed every soul in that cursed building. Despite Sarah's warnings, people continued to move into the building. They dismissed her warnings as mere superstition and urban legend. They believed that they were safe and that nothing could harm them. However, they were wrong. One by one, the residents of the building began to experience strange occurrences. They heard unexplained noises in the middle of the night, felt a chilling presence watching them, and saw dark shadows moving about their apartments. At first, they tried to ignore it, but the occurrences grew more frequent and intense. They started to fear for their lives and sought Sarah's help. Sarah knew that the dark figure had returned, and she was the only one who could stop it. She advised the residents to leave the building immediately, but it was too late. The dark figure had already taken hold of the building, and it was not going to let anyone leave. Sarah knew that she had to confront the dark figure once again. Armed with her knowledge of the occult, she entered the building and started performing a ritual to banish the dark figure back to the realm from which it came. As she performed the ritual, she could feel the presence of the dark figure growing stronger. She could hear its whispers in her ear and feel its breath on her neck. She knew that she had to stay focused and complete the ritual. After what felt like hours, the ritual was complete, and the dark figure was banished. The building was once again safe, and the residents could return to their normal lives. However, Sarah knew that the dark figure was not gone for good. It was merely waiting for the right moment to strike again. She knew that she had to stay vigilant and always be prepared to confront it. Years went by, and Sarah continued to keep a watchful eye on the building. She knew that the dark figure was still out there, waiting for its next opportunity. But she was ready. It was a dark and foggy night, and the only sound that could be heard was the gentle flow of the river. A lone figure appeared on the riverbank, illuminated only by the pale moonlight. It was a woman, dressed in a tattered white gown, her long hair whipping around her face in the wind. The woman stood perfectly still, staring out into the river as if she were lost in thought. As I watched her from across the river, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something about her that was off, something that made my skin crawl. I couldn't take my eyes off her, and as I watched, the woman slowly turned to face me. Her face was twisted into a grotesque smile, and her eyes glinted with a sinister light. I tried to look away, but I was transfixed. Suddenly, the woman began to walk towards me, her movements slow and deliberate. I wanted to run, to get as far away from her as possible, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. As the woman drew closer, I could see that her skin was pale and almost translucent. Her fingers were long and bony, like the talons of a bird of prey. Her eyes never left mine as she approached, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. When the woman was just a few feet away, she stopped and tilted her head, as if studying me. Her breath was cold and smelled of decay, and I felt a scream building in my throat. Suddenly, the woman lunged at me, her hands reaching out to grab me. I stumbled backwards, tripping over a rock and falling to the ground. The woman continued to advance, her eyes fixed on me. I scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the woman's laughter echoing behind me, and I knew I had to get away. I ran for what felt like hours, the sound of the woman's laughter ringing in my ears. Finally, I collapsed in exhaustion, my body shaking with fear. When I finally caught my breath, I looked up and saw the woman standing just a few feet away. She was still smiling that twisted smile, her eyes fixed on me. I knew then that I was doomed, that I would never be able to escape the woman on the riverbank. As she reached out to grab me, I closed my eyes and braced myself for the worst. But when I opened my eyes, the woman was gone. I looked around, trying to catch a glimpse of her in the darkness, but there was no sign of her. The only sound that could be heard was the gentle flow of the river. I sat there for a long time, my heart still racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it all been a hallucination, a nightmare? Or had I really encountered some kind of supernatural being? As I sat there, I began to feel a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was as if the woman had taken all my fear and terror with her when she disappeared. I got up, brushed myself off, and began to walk back home. But the memory of the woman on the riverbank stayed with me for a long time. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there somewhere, waiting for her next victim. Over the years, I would hear stories from others who claimed to have seen the woman on the riverbank. Some said she was a ghost, others a demon, but everyone agreed on one thing: she was the most terrifying thing they had ever seen. I never went back to that riverbank again. But even now, years later, I still get chills thinking about that night and the woman who haunted my dreams.